Legendary Pokemon are pretty dang fascinating. Not only are they the focus of most of the main series Pokemon games, but there's also so much detail that goes into their creation as well. Since these special Pokemon are so cool, why don't we try creating some of our own? Today I am going to be highlighting 5 legendary and mythical Pokemon I have created with the help of some awesome artists who you can check out with the link in the description. These all come from my Pokemon Cardinal series, which you should also check out if you haven't, and we'll be exploring their inspirations, background, and more. Something else that's also pretty fascinating though is the wonderful sponsor of today's video, Guardian Tales. Guardian Tales is a free mobile game for iOS and Android that harkens back to the days of classic retro RPGs. With beautiful pixel graphics and tons of references to popular games, comic books, movies, and more, you'll feel like you're right back in the heat of the 90s all over again. The game has multiple modes, including a unique story mode, multiple multiplayer modes, including PvP and raids, a challenging tower mode, and even a mode where you can build your own castles and guilds and share them with other players. The game even has over 50 characters to choose from, with over 200 pieces of unique equipment that can be used to upgrade and change the look of your characters. So download Guardian Tales for free today using the link in the description and start soaking in all that retro classic goodness. And thank you again to Guardian Tales for sponsoring this video. Alrighty, so starting us off, there are obviously a couple of different subgroups within the larger group that is Legendary and Mythical Pokemon, with one of those subgroups being Legendary Trios. We get Legendary Trios in almost every generation, so naturally I needed to take a shot at creating my own, and these are what I ultimately came up with. Trios always have some kind of common theme, be it the beasts, the birds, the golems, the lake trio, etc., which is why my trio has a common theme as well, and that would be the theme of life. That's right, collectively these guys are known as the Life Trio, and they represent different stages of life itself. The first member of this trio is Burnham, who represents the beginning of life. That is why it is wearing an eggshell as if it was newly born itself. Additionally, this trio of Pokemon are also based around an object that represents the phase of life that they also represent, with Burnham's object being an egg, since eggs are commonly associated with newborns. This is also why its fairy type, as the miracle of birth, is looked at as almost a magical thing in a lot of respects, which is why I felt the fairy type fit in here well, not to mention that this is a legendary Pokemon who would very much be a part of fairy tales itself within the world of Pokemon. And it's actually a good thing we're on the topic of fairies, because that is also the general idea of what inspired the bodies of these Pokemon and what gave them the physical form that I put all of these other inspirations onto. I was very inspired by the Lake Trio in this respect, and a more fairy-like design also makes a lot of sense for these three, since within the story of Pokemon Cardinal, they are very elusive and truly are a part of fairy tales within their region of Norclo. This ultimately comes full circle in their names, with Burnham's name coming from birth and nymph, which is a kind of mythological spirit and is also the name of the immature form of some insects, which fits perfectly with Burnham representing the beginning of life. The next member of the Life Trio would be Primri, who represents the prime of life. In addition to this, the object that it is also inspired by, that represents its phase of life, is a trophy, as in a trophy that someone might win in a competition thanks to being at their physical peak. This is why its entire body resembles that of a trophy, even down to the position of its arms being placed at its hips while it puffs out its chest in a show of confidence, resembling the way the handles on a trophy are placed. Its body itself is also comprised of the 3 primary colors that a trophy would traditionally be: the first place gold, the second place silver, and the third place bronze. It is also thanks to representing the prime of life that it is fighting fighting type, as once again, this represents the physical peak of a living thing. And finally, its name comes from prime, as in the prime of life, and fairy, going along with its fairy-like body style, just like its two other fellow members. The third and final member of this line represents the end of life and is known as Finrit. Being that it represents this stage of life, Finrit heavily resembles an older person with its hunched posture, hands held behind its back, and most notably, its bushy spectral eyebrows. The object that inspires Finrit's design and represents this stage of life is much more subtle than its counterparts, but is still present, and that would be a bone. This is illustrated in the pattern on Finrit's chest and stomach, resembling a ribcage. The ghost typing on this mon is also pretty self-explanatory for what it represents, and its name comes from Fin, which means end, and Sprite, yet another fairy-like creature. Another classic genre of legendary Pokemon is the iconic box art legendary. This is the kind of legendary Pokemon that the games and story often revolve around, so of course I had to create one of my own as well. My creation in this category would be Cardivios. As with all box art legendaries, the setting these Pokemon reside in heavily play into what they are, which is why it's important to bring up that Cardivios is the main legendary for a Canada-based Pokemon region, in case any of you were unaware. This is what gives it its primarily red and white color scheme, paying homage to the Canadian flag. The red color, or should I say cardinal color, also comes from the cardinal bird, which also inspires the Pokemon's design itself, as you can see in its fairly distinctive head crest. As for the rest of the inspiration, it's more or less a hodgepodge of different elements. Since Cardivios is a legendary Pokemon, it takes inspiration from a multitude of legendary creatures, giving it an almost griffin-like appearance and even having a tail resembling that of a dragon. Its typing is also pretty deeply inspired as well. It has the Fire-Ice type because, well, that type is really cool and has never been used prior to Zen Mode Galarian Darmanitan. However, it's not just given to it for no reason. A big theme of the story of Pokemon Cardinal, which Cardivios headlines, is balance, and its importance in basically all things. So fire and ice reside within the legendary of this region, showing that opposing forces can coexist peacefully. They also match up, color-wise, with the Canadian red and white theme, as fire and ice are often represented by red and white respectively. Finally, the name Cardivios comes from cardinal, as in the bird and the color, divine, as in divine intervention, illustrating its godlike status in the region, and Dios, which is the Spanish word for God, further emphasizing this character trait. And last but not least, all regions have at least one mythical Pokemon, so we have definitely got to do that too. The mythical Pokemon I have created is Morvitur, and it acts as a trio master for the Life Trio. As such, it continues their theme of the concept of life and represents the afterlife more specifically. Now, the afterlife is pretty commonly depicted as being divided into two halves, heaven and hell. However, since Morvitur represents the afterlife as a whole, and not just one side or the other, it is inspired by both. That is, naturally, where you get the black and white color scheme, the dark fairy typing, and it's also what inspires its body style too. Morvitur's design is heavily inspired by both sheep, particularly lambs, and goats, and this is due to both of these animals kind of being a mascot of sorts for heaven and hell respectively, and is often seen as symbolic of them as well. Given that sheeps and goats are fairly similar animals, it was basically a perfect fit to blend them together into one Pokemon. The name Morvitur is very interesting as well because it's not exactly obvious when it comes to just looking at it. In fact, the name is so intricate that I can't quite remember exactly how I came up with it. I do know that it comes from the prefix mort, meaning death or dying, and vivir or vive, meaning living or life in Spanish, which once again calls back to the duality of the afterlife this Pokemon represents in its design. And that was basically the gist of it anyway, so we'll just forget about the fact that the rest of it slipped my mind. But yeah, those are some legendary Pokemon I created. I feel pretty good about them in general, but what do you guys think about them? And what would you do if you were creating a legendary Pokemon? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe if you haven't already for more Pokemon content all the time. With that said, I will see you all very soon with another video, and until then, as always, I will smell you guys later.